Welcome to the Texas Oil and Gas Podcast, the show dedicated to bring you the news from the oil patch deep in the heart of Texas, with your hosts, Ryan Ray and Josh Shelton.
And we're back with the Texas Oil and Gas Podcast. This is episode 134. I'm your host, Josh Shelton, my friend and co-host, Ryan Ray. Ryan, another week, man. We're coming up on the holidays. We're trying to wrap up a few things this year. We got a couple of stories to cover. How's it going on your end?
Going good. And let's talk, Josh, real quick. So we're recording this on, what's today?
Today is the 16th of December.
So we will have 3 shows coming out across the holidays. We'll have one on the 23rd, one on the 30th, and one on the January 6th. Now, those will be special editions. Josh and I will not be recording like we do on a weekly basis. We have some pre-tape stuff that we're recording this week. So those will be recorded and released, assuming Nate does his job. You know what? I was getting a little ahead of myself.
Yeah, you're presuming a lot.
Yeah, Josh and I will record them. I can't promise what's actually going to happen to them. But so anyways, so 23rd, 30th, and the 6th, the listeners will have podcasting content on this thread coming out. With that being said, Josh, final call. I got a few late notices for the Nate Goes in the Lake stickers, so I have not sent those out. If you want some, I need to know. I will probably send them out no later than Thursday this week, so ryan@goR2.com.
So get those reviews in and your direct messages to Ryan.
We don't need more reviews.
We're at 214 reviews. 214. 11 more, and Ryan and Josh join me in Lake Granbury. Listeners, if you want to see a podcast host in its natural habitat, water up to its neck, Josh Shelton and Ryan Ray will be your natural podcast hosts next January. If you just give us 11 more reviews with a little tap of your button. The Texas Oil and Gas Podcast on iTunes or your podcast app.
No, it has to be iTunes. It has to be iTunes.
Man, you ruined my NPR.
You're doing good, and it has to be 5 stars.
And
like you was calling out the 1 stars. We can't have that. That's why you can't run the show, Nate. Right there, it's 5 stars in iTunes. We don't want them. We don't want them until after January 1, though.
Oh, actually, we want them immediately before Thursday. You don't get a sticker if you don't get it in before Thursday.
Yeah, well, we don't want them between now and Thursday. January 1, pound up 5-star reviews. Speaking of listeners, a few weeks ago I was kind of depressed because we had a listener, Jamin 811, who was talking about Josh is the man and he can enunciate. Well, he sent in a request for a sticker. And so I said, hey, I'm not giving you one because you're Team Josh. And he sent back, I had to do it. I feel like Josh and Nate are too fragile to poke at, so you had to take the brunt of it. In all reality, Texas Oil and Gas Podcast and Energy Week are awesome. I've got some mid-majors in my account book from what I sell, and the 2 podcasts have been instrumental in laying the foundation for getting the industry knowledge. So Jim is not really a Team Josh guy or a Team Nate guy.
I think that was a strategy to get a sticker, Ryan. That's all it was.
He said you guys are too fragile, which if he knows y'all quite well, I should say. We do have 2 more 5-star reviews to read. One is from H-Town Aggie, great podcast, always entertaining with great insight into all areas of oil and gas. Great to hear hot topics and professional insight into current happenings in the oil patch. Nice to stay in the loop and gain knowledge in areas of our industry that I both do and do not typically work in. Keep up the good work. Gig 'em.
Go Aggies.
Yeah, and then one more. Best oil and gas pod out there. This is from UT Pre-Med, so I'm not sure. We'll get in a second. As a student of petrogeology and engineering, these guys are both informative and entertaining, both new bucks to the industry like myself, and those who are lifetime oil industry can get a ton of great info on not just the Texas Oil and Gas Podcast, but also the world. He acknowledges that I'm the foreign. Yeah, you see
foreign
that
correspondent, international arms dealer Ryan Ray.
Well, I won the award for not diplomat, but
Foreign policy.
Foreign policy expert. Thank you. He caught that. It's good to know.
It's been impressive to me, Ryan, is that the podcast has been able to do so much with me when I'm having to work with two new bucks in the industry.
Let's finish this person's review before we get too far off. I tell everyone I can about this podcast. Me and some other Marines in the industry highly support you guys. Keep up the awesome work. Thank you, and thank you to all the Marines out there. I think that's the first time we've heard of
guys.
First Marine listeners out there, but it's young bucks. I heard you, Joshua. So, anyways, smartest listeners in the industry, as I said multiple times. Last week I was a podcasting god. This week we hear that the listeners understand the fragile nature of you two, and so that's good to know. So, yeah, it's been a good week, man. Good week.
Great week. Well, it's been a good week for a lot of folks. But Chevron actually they're doing an $11 billion write down amid weak gas prices. So we know earlier this year they had the $1 billion that they got from Anadarko for not buying. So they were showing a really strong year this year. I think they're, as far as profit margins, are number one because of that. But their Appalachia assets are not doing very well. So they saw a slump in prices, and so they're doing a write down of pretty major budget changes there. So it's going to be interesting to see what Chevron does. I've got my ear to the ground, and I think there's going to be some movement in the Permian this year. Ryan, you actually had a couple of insights into
Yeah, because I actually read what they said. I'm at Bloomberg, but I actually read what they put in their paper, their quarterly release, it was really tough, Josh. Really tough. Took a lot of, I don't know how someone like me who was able to get this and not Bloomberg. But if you actually go read what Chevron put out there, essentially they are writing this down, as you mentioned, and Bloomberg was able to pick out. But if you go to their quarterly releasings, and I put this on LinkedIn, essentially, if you just scroll down the page just a smidge there, they have some verbiage talking about last year or what they're going to do in the Permian. And let's see here. This is what it says. In the upstream, this is from their quarterly report. In the upstream business, approximately $11 billion is forecasted to sustain and grow currently producing assets, including about $4 billion from Permian unconventional development and about $1 billion for other international unconventional development. That doesn't really mean anything, right? Because last year they could have had, $100 billion, so they could be going down from 11, or they could have had 5. So I did a lot of hard research. I just went back a whole year, which was like I had to go back one page of things. So a lot of work. Took me a half a second to find this, and it says last year the same verbiage. It's tough. In the upstream business, approximately $10.4 billion is forecasted to sustain, including 3.6 in the Permian. Now, I don't have one of them fancy degrees on my wall like those folks at Bloomberg do, Josh, but it sounds like they're increasing their budget in the Permian by the tune of $400 million. So, yes, they are writing down their gas stuff. Yes, they are getting rid of it. Yes, that's all true, but for this show and the folks that we care about and deal with in this part of the world, they're increasing their budget $400 million. And I didn't see that headline anywhere. Did you catch that headline?
Nope.
Okay. I didn't make sure.
You got to hear, first, folks. Texas Oil and Gas Podcast. Chevron has increased in Permian budget by $400 million.
Yeah, we had to get out the Excel, the calculators. We had to call in analysts. It was tough to decipher that from those reports. I mean, you heard it was almost word for word the same thing, just change the numbers. It was tough for us simpletons to figure out, but we did persevere. We figured it out. So yeah, they write it down. Sure. If you're a stock guy and it's relevant to you, then there obviously is some potential concern there. But for us in the Permian, $400 million increase, and we can watch next year to see where exactly they deploy that to. That could go a lot of different areas inside their upstream business. But sounds like Chevron's optimistic about what they're going to be doing next year in the Permian, but you wouldn't have called that from the headlines.
We've been talking a little bit about some of the majors starting to circle around the Permian as some of these smaller companies are struggling. I wonder with the budget that they have and some of these the write downs, if there's possibly trying to free up some capital for other means. Maybe acquiring some additional acreage or picking up a company here. But with their increased budget in the Permian, it seems that there's definitely intention to grow their assets there and really start deploying more. So I'm eager to see that.
Yeah, and I mean, the final thing I say is if you kind of look through this Bloomberg piece, which will be linked to in the show notes, it does mention that the overall budget is increasing. But when they talk about the Permian, they say Worth has made crude production from the Permian Basin the centerpiece of his global strategy, with a budget of $4 billion for the shale play next year. And it goes on to say that it doesn't, it doesn't say anything else about they increased or decreased the budget. So it's just funny that they just completely omit that fact, unless I'm missing it somewhere. But yeah, the headlines were definitely true, but also for what we care about, a little bit misleading, I felt. So I wanted to get that out there.
The article came out from the Houston Chronicle. Permian drilling must pick up just to maintain current production. So we've been talking a little bit about some of the efficiencies in the industry, how the rig count has been dropping, drilling has been decreasing, but production has been up. So this article is basically arguing that trend can't continue, that drilling is going to have to accelerate if we're going to, at least at a minimum, maintain production, that drilling cannot continue to slow down, which common sense, Ryan, I think we all knew that this was coming. Apparently it's getting pretty close that as drilling is hitting a point now where they're not going to be able to continue production levels with current trends of decreasing in rig count.
It's funny because I remember back in June, folks talking about we had enough DUCs at that time to keep, if production stopped, essentially, and we could keep production at the same level for 6 months. Drilling hasn't stopped, and now we're already seeing these articles in December saying that if the drilling's got to pick up to keep production, which is, so it's one of those things where just last week, 2 weeks ago, hey, we're gonna have and there was stories last week about we're gonna have a glut in oil. We got too much oil. So it's hard to tell what is it, because is it we need to pick up production or we need to lower production? OPEC cuts, are they going to work? Are they not going to work? You look at something like Chevron's increasing their budget. And so, yes, obviously the decline rates require that you replace the wells faster in the shale plays than in conventional. That's nothing new. But yeah, I think it's one of those deals where you look at it and you go, well, just 2 weeks ago, and even last week, there were reports coming out about, the price is going to, well, what was the report you were talking about? Goldman Sachs or someone said they expect the price to be down $5 over the course of next year compared to this year. I think it was you telling me that. Someone told me about Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, I did. I looked at it because they showed it was going to drop by $2 in every category: Brent, WTI.
Yeah.
It was all those.
Yeah. So it's that time of year again where people are making their predictions and stating the I don't know the obvious, but stating the things that they gotta get their articles out. And so this is one of those ones where I don't know really what the takeaway is, because if production goes away. If drilling goes away, production has to decline. I think we broke that news on here too, once or twice.
Yeah. Well, so Ryan, it looks like Chesapeake ended up being. Was it did they get a warning, or were they actually delisted this past week?
Yeah. So what happens is if you trade below $1 for 30 consecutive days, then you get a warning. And then when you get that warning, you have to hit certain standards, or they kick you off. So they are now. Probation might be a good way to think about it.
Phase.
Right. Yeah, they are in trouble, and so but it's not. They have to trade above $1, I think, every day for 30 days, if I remember correctly. So it's not. So before, and I'm not a stockbroker, but my understanding was if they would have just hit $1, one of those days in there, they wouldn't have gotten this warning. But they didn't. But now I think they have to stay above $1 for 30 days, I believe is how it is, which is not necessarily an easy task to do when you can't get above $1 for one day. So I know we talked on here about people potentially looking to buy some of their assets and stuff like that. I know they're saying that they got a plan to kind of get things going again, but it's definitely It's definitely something that you're like, okay, this is it. And I must give Sergio Chapa props here. We give him a hard time on the show a lot, but I think I shared this article and I sent it to him just because we always talk about Chesapeake and stuff, and he pointed out that on Friday the 13th, I have dubbed Chesapeake Jason, and on Friday the 13th, Jason might have finally gotten the axe.
Yeah,
I thought that was that's probably in the 3 years I've known him the best insight he's ever given me. And so. If you don't know, on LinkedIn, I've joked about Chesapeake being Jason, and you just can't actually get rid of him. And there was Friday the 13th. Jason might actually be beginning to see the beginning of the end of at least what we've formerly understood as Chesapeake. So, bad day for those guys for sure. And final thing is, if my math is right, they should have got this notice sooner. So I don't know how that works, but I did wonder why they haven't received this. I thought maybe I'd missed them hitting $1 at some point. So I wonder, and maybe one of the listeners who knows, can they hold the notice for so long before they announce it? Because there was 3 companies that on Friday that announced that they're getting potentially delisted. Them, McDermott, and one other. So it was a bad day for folks in the industry as far as that goes.
Carbo. That's the other company. So we had an article that came out. This was pretty interesting read. Sergio released an article. Houston billionaire buys nearly 1 million shares of Enterprise Products Partners. So went back, did a little research. She bought 25 million over the past week, which it was 950,000 shares, and a total that gives her 699 million shares. In case you're wondering who this is Randa Duncan Williams, and what I didn't know at the time, but been looking at, is that Dan Duncan is actually the founder of Enterprise Products. So she owns approximately 1/3 of the company. And for her to go in and double down and buy some of these stocks, it makes me think that Enterprise is in a really good spot right now.
At least she thinks they are.
Yeah, she thinks they are.
And it should be, for those of you who aren't sure who Dan Duncan is, I thought he was the richest person in Houston, but I did a quick search here.
Kinder Morgan, Rich Morgan, I think.
He was the 3rd richest person in Texas. Duncan was the richest person in the city of Houston and the 3rd richest person in Texas with $8.2 billion in 2008.
Wow. So once he died,
and he was worth $9 billion by the time of his death. This is according to, I think, Forbes via Wikipedia. So we can hash it out later. But he was, I think, because we've done some work for those guys, and I think at the time we first started coming across them, that was kind of being talked about. Now this would have been after that. But anyways, so she's in charge of the family fund, the Duncan Family Fund. And it's an interesting story if you kind of go back and just look at kind of how they amassed all of these companies, over the years. And so
she's number 2 now in Houston. $6 billion is what she's worth, which is behind Rich Kinder. He's worth, I don't even have his numbers, but he's the number 1 in Houston now.
Sounds like she needs to invest in a podcast.
That would be the thing. She would be number 1 within.
She could be the richest podcaster.
Yeah.
In Texas.
Maybe in the world.
I mean, we're happy to find out.
Yeah.
We're happy to find out.
We're definitely,
Yeah, so let's
8 figures.
Miss Duncan Williams, if you want to come on and talk about that, we can have our people get in touch with your people.
All right, so for the Texas Roundup, we have a couple of stories we wanted to touch on. Epic Crude announces first shipment of crude oil for export from Epic Dock. So the shipment of crude from the IGC Marine Terminal located in the inner harbor of the Corpus Christi Ship Channel. They just loaded their first shipment of crude oil. So that Epic Crude is shipping its first shipment. So that was interesting news. It makes me also, as I'm thinking about it now, want to go do some digging around and see what's going on with the ship channel, with Corpus, with Trafigura, and all of that. So we hadn't checked on that in quite a while. So kind of a
Carlisle,
mental note to go back.
What was it, about a month ago?
When all that was going, yeah. Houston private equity buys Austin oil and gas firm for $200 million. So Jones Energy was a private equity firm. Jones Energy bought Revolution Resources for $200 million.
Actually, no, I got that wrong, Josh. Let's see here. Mountain Capital Partners will merge Jones Energy into Revolution Resources. I think I said it backwards there. Jones also owns Anadarko Basin acreage and the Texas Panhandle. Mountain Capital was founded 4 years ago and has 4 oil and gas company portfolios, including Revolution, which was started in 2018. So clear that up a little bit there.
Shell contracts for 4G LTE network in the Gulf of Mexico. So for those that enjoyed the talk that David Blackman and I had on the podcast that day, we were discussing some of the cellular and other contracts. Yeah, and Sergio was on with us last week. I think.
About a couple weeks ago, but talking about this out in the Permian, yeah.
Yeah, just some of the digital and data that are out in the Permian. So Royal Dutch Shell will extend 4G LTE wireless networks across all of its operations in the Gulf of Mexico in order to speed up its offshore digitalization efforts. Shell is contracting with Norway-based Tampnet to install wireless LTE equipment and coverage to all of its Gulf facilities. It says here that Tampnet has built out a network for about 80,000 square miles of offshore coverage in the Gulf of Mexico. So that I think some of these developments may end up having some implications for the Permian developments. I think these partnerships may end up leading to some of these other companies going the route that Shell is and partnering with some of these companies like Tampnet to go in and build better infrastructure for data. Exxon prevails in climate change lawsuit. So we don't
want to get too far on this because we think we have a special guest coming on to talk about this. This. So
okay,
it did break last week, and we did want to mention it, but we do have a guest we're hoping to get on one of these weeks that we're off. We're hoping to have on a guest coming on Friday to discuss it. So we will tease that, and if he doesn't come on and you do not get that, we know who to blame.
Who to blame?
Nate. Okay, so Nate, you're on.
Me?
Yeah. So
Me.
If it doesn't happen while we're gone for holiday break, then we blame you. So.
Well, shoot. If it does happen, can I not go in the lake?
Well, I mean, I was texting with listeners. This was Saturday at 7:20, getting this set up. So
Man of the people.
Man of the people. That's right.
All right, so a story that I feel like we just covered. Basic Energy Service exits hydraulic fracturing business. So the story that came out previously was Basic Energy was filing for bankruptcy.
And they got delisted too, didn't they?
I think so,
yeah.
Yes. So It says that they are exiting the hydraulic fracturing business in total, and they are... So the company reported that it is selling almost all of its assets in the pressure pumping business, which includes hydraulic fracturing and other related services. Basic intends to use the proceeds from the sales to reinvest and focus on its core business of well production services and to expand its oil field wastewater disposal services. So that's going to be the trajectory for Basic. It'd be curious to see how they do.
It's funny. I talked to a guy just the other day who is kind of in this space and pretty locked in, and he was saying that the pressure pumping business he believes is actually one of the better businesses to be in moving forward. And so to see Basic, getting out of that business. Now he had some specific reasons of why that was the case, but it makes me wonder if Basic maybe had missed the boat on some of that. I don't know much about Basic's internal workings, but he did say that he thought there would be a lot of opportunity in that space if you were strategically positioned. So to see that they're getting out of it now, I wonder, kind of what led to that from that. But, they're moving to the wastewater disposal, or are going to expand its wastewater disposal. And that's a space, Josh, we talked about. You remember, the sand boom. The sand was going crazy and then kind of died off. And you just wonder if the water, I know right now water is the thing and everyone says it can't slow down, but you do wonder if that's a short-term deal or a long-term deal. And I'm not not the water expert on wastewater disposal for sure, but the more money that gets pushed over there, it feels like the shorter, the faster rather, that the slowdown or flattening off will come, especially since it's tied on some level to production and drilling. So if that's leveling off, so I'm just curious as we go into 2020. If the rig count doesn't really ramp up, what the headlines will read about wastewater disposal as it pertains to drilling and fracking and stuff like that. Will companies find themselves in a spot that they overplayed that hand, or is there just that such a backlog in work that really we have a long time to unwind it? So again, I don't really have a strong stance. I'm just looking at it going, okay, the rig count's going down, production is going to slow down. You did have a kind of a bottleneck here on the wastewater side, but at some point you feel like that has to level off. Shouldn't the slowdown in drilling help expedite that? So anyways, love to hear some listeners' comments on that. Ryan at GoR2.com or TexasOilAndGasPodcast.com. Let us know your comments on the future of the water stuff as it pertains to 2020. I'm sure we got some listeners who are a lot more keyed in on those predictions than I am.
Also, there was a report from the EIA that came out. The United States set new records for proved reserves of oil and natural gas, as well as for production in 2018. So lots of interesting takeaways here in this article. Definitely put it in the show notes. Some cool things there. I know being a net exporter was something that we reached for, I think, 1 month, for a single month. The first month in a long time that we've actually been a net exporter of oil and natural gas. So lots of cool things here.
Yeah, and we will go. This is came out last. I guess it was last week. Or no, actually, yeah. It came out last week because the next release it's an annual report that they do, so it kind of goes year on year, and so you can kind of read the summary here if that is something that tickles your fancy. But yeah, a lot of good stuff. If you're curious about reserves, where they're at, or at least where the EIA thinks they're at, that's. It's got a lot of good stuff, and also you get access to the data. So we'll link to that in the show notes. And Josh, it's one of those deals where if you kind of get in there, you start looking at it, you can spend hours just kind of reading about the data, think about the implications. I will say this real quick: crude oil and least condensate from U.S. shale plays. This was as of December 31st of 2018. 7 major shale plays accounted for 49% of all U.S. crude oil and least condensate proved reserves. The Wolfcamp Bone Spring shale play in the Permian Basin remains the largest oil-producing shale play in the United States, and then it goes on to break it down there. So obviously I knew the shale had a major impact. I didn't know where it was. 49% of the crude oil as of today are proved reserves. Obviously that doesn't mean all, but proved reserves, 49% is from shale. So, which I don't know. Would you have thought that number been higher or lower?
I would expect it to be high, honestly.
Well, I guess it would depend on how much, and I don't have the data here. If they're considering offshore as part of the proved reserves, if they are, then that would lower it. That makes sense. If they're not, then it would be, let's see here. No, I mean, according to this, they don't have anything offshore. That's not saying it's not part of it, but at least it's not listed in that chart there. So anyways, yeah, 49% was, I don't know where they actually measured that compared to the offshore stuff, but if they are measuring offshore, then it would kind of make sense. If they're not, then it would be kind of surprising.
Okay, today we have a special guest coming on the show, Joseph Latronica. He is a product manager for the multiphase production systems at Leistritz. Joe, it's great to have you on the show today, man. I've been looking forward to it for a little while.
Yeah, it's great to be on. Thanks for inviting us. Looking
Joe,
forward to it as well.
Joe, I actually was at a flaring conference in Midland. This was about a month and a half ago, and there was a gentleman there by the name of George. He sat next to me at the table, and we had several hours of good conversation. We were listening to some different companies give some presentations, and come to find out he was actually giving a presentation that day as well. And so I talked to him a little bit. He had a lot of interesting things to say, and so I shot him an email over after the meeting, and he thought it would be a good idea to get somebody from your company to come on and share some insights into the industry and with flaring regulations, environmental on the Texas and New Mexico side of the Permian. So there's lots of interesting things going on, and just kind of giving you a little background of how I come into the position to reach out to you guys.
Great. Yeah, I spoke to George briefly about this, and I know I work pretty close with George trying to tackle this Permian market as well as other areas in South America. So it's seems to be an interesting time of year. We're getting a lot more information coming from the end users. We're getting inquiries, and it's looking up. And it looks like the industry is starting to change a bit. So we're excited.
So from your perspective, Joe, when y'all were looking at some of the environmental regulations with flaring and the way things are developing, obviously you see that as an opportunity for multiphase production. So tell us a little bit about what multiphase production is and what some of the solutions it could bring to the industry in the Permian. So what is it, and how is the situation in the Permian kind of a right fit for it?
Sure. Well, we're all used to conventional separation with lots of equipment, flaring, tanks, and all different pumps and processing. So the multi-phase system was kind of designed to eliminate a lot of that. You eliminate it at the wellhead, and instead of having separate pipelines and flaring at each wellhead or a series of wells or batteries, you're putting it to a central facility and basically utilizing the smaller footprint. With the new regulations coming out now, flaring has been a very hot topic right now, and pun intended. We're wasting a lot of gas, and I know there is a hard time getting the gas conveyed through pipelines because of capacity and stuff, but we still are wasting a lot of energy. The multi-phase pump system, it eliminates the capital costs and operating expenses as well, and conveys one pipeline instead of three. And again, your flare is eliminated at the wellhead, and so less emissions. Some of the other benefits too. I mean, some gas wells, they'll utilize gas engines and they'll burn the gas right there. So use sales gas to convey the system, right, and drive it. So we're really looking at this the flare reduction as a good opportunity for multi-phase pumping and changing the actual design of the field, which the benefit is pretty big, because by utilizing the system, we can lower the back pressure, and then you do boost production.
Yeah, so a couple questions here to kind of walk maybe me and the listeners through this process. Are you talking, so, as we see it now, we hear calls for open season and producers guarantee volumes of a specific product to pipeline companies. So would this be for future production that hasn't come online? Are you looking for to deal with production that has not come online, or would this be retroactive where producers have already obligations and maybe this is a way to help them maximize that? How does that work from your perspective?
Okay, so we deal with a lot of greenfields and brownfields. I noticed in the States, just through experience, greenfields aren't as prominent as overseas and in other countries. So it's starting. We're starting to see more of that because of locations of the wells. They might not have enough real estate to put a big system in. Mm-hmm. And they realize that, hey, maybe putting one single pipeline in might be a better idea. So it might be cost effective for that. And it wasn't until just recently that we started seeing that trend. So that being said, seeing a lot more interest coming from the Texas markets now. It used to be predominantly more offshore because of footprint size, but now onshore, we're starting to see more and more interest as a startup, and doing that cost analysis to see if it's beneficial to do a multi-phase system as opposed to traditional. And in some instances, it has worked out positive, where multi-phase systems have been more economical. And I mean to the extreme. So there are some benefits to that as well.
Right. And one of the reasons we see in the pipeline space is that they do separate it is, as you mentioned, there's some cost issues, but also there's integrity issues. Depending on what kind of oil you're putting into the pipe, you have heating issues and things like this. When you go through this process of what you guys are proposing, like how do you work through those issues on the front end so that the pipeline company can understand, long-term integrity issues that they might face. They might understand if they put, this product through the pipeline, this is the type of preventive measures we need to take. But when you multi-phase it, is it that you kind of have a new spec that you give them, or how do walk me through that process? Because that would be one of the questions that, just from dealing with the pipeline companies in the past, that I would have is I don't know how you're how do you keep from those issues coming up, 5, 10, 15 years down the road where it's a different type of product than they're used to dealing with?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. As you know, we handle many different products in the oil field, whether it's chemicals, whether it's, inhibitors and everything else. And it's constantly changing, not to mention frac water and abrasives and all that stuff coming through. So when we do these designs, we do work closely with the pipeline company and the process engineers and the field guys, just to determine what may happen over the life of the wells and the pipeline. Yeah, we've come online in midstream, and the stuff you'll drag through a pipeline that hasn't been utilized in a while is also a factor. So we try to tend to keep the velocities out of the pump low within the spec. We keep an eye on the temperatures. So if we are changing anything through the pipeline. We work pretty close with the midstream companies just to make sure that they're getting a product that their system can handle.
Right. And so on that, let me reverse engineer the question. We saw last year, I believe it was, or earlier this year, Epic actually had a pipeline that they were going to use for natural gas, and the prices were so low, they said we're going to put oil through it for a few months while they're waiting on their oil pipeline to be completed. Obviously, there's a lot of pipe in the ground already. Is this something where you could go to midstream companies now and say, hey, guys, I know you're concerned about the issues I just laid out. Here is some preventative measures that we can work with you guys on. We know that if the Texas Railroad Commission says changes their stance on flaring, you guys could have an opportunity here to go ahead, and you might have a pipeline that's not at full capacity for whatever reason. Here's a way to go market your pipelines to producers. So is that also possible, or does it need to be more front-end type startup on the pipeline side of things?
It would probably be more front-end startup on the pipeline. Because obviously some of the pipes are in the ground for a long time, and the pipeline integrity could be under distress or something. So we could have all kinds of issues. I've had people talk to us about that, saying that if you change the velocity in some of the pipelines, it's so old, there could result some issues with the pipeline. And it's best to do that up front with those guys, and then work out a way. And if it's something that we can handle on the discharge to change velocities going into it, or some sort of either flow rate or inhibitor or something, it's best to work up on the front line.
Right. Now, you mentioned the natural gas, and if you could package the natural gas through this multi-phase process, it is theoretically possible that the companies could make money, but also you could make the argument that you're putting more natural gas into the supply system, which would depress prices. So obviously, if you have a regulatory mandate that shifts the market, that kind of makes you do this, that's one thing. But just from a pure economic standpoint, what would be the potential upside for doing it this way as opposed to flaring it off? Let's just from a pure economics, not necessarily environmental standpoint or regulatory standpoint, but just from an economic standpoint, is there a benefit to doing it this way?
Well, by lowering the back pressure, we're going to get more gas, obviously, on the well. So as we lower it, we're also bringing up liquids. And if it's an existing wellhead and we have downhole equipment, we're bringing these, the gas and liquid to a bubble point where you're going to get better uptime on your artificial lift equipment. So that reduces your CapEx and OpEx for repairing that equipment. You're getting more uptime on pump jacks, you're getting more uptime on ESPs, and yes, you're putting more gas into it, but with that, it's coming to liquid. You are, like I said, drawing up more gas, but you're going to get a gain in liquid, and that's going to give you additional revenue. And you're also, like I said, reducing the cost of the existing downhole equipment, which 95% of the wells all have some sort of artificial lift. And if they're not operating at the bubble point and those liquids aren't coming into the well, you're not getting the full work of the equipment.
So let me see if I'm following you along here. If, let's say, for instance, you typically got 40% of the oil in an area, would this method maybe bump it up to 42% recoverability or 43%? I mean, I'm not asking you to put an exact number on it, but are you saying that actually you're going to get more oil out of a per well basis doing this because of those things you just described?
Sure. Again, like I said, as you lower the wellhead pressure, you're definitely going to boost your production up. You could get anywhere from 10%, if not more. Depends on how much liquid you have there. It's kind of hard to put a number on it, but it's your productivity index. And lately we've been working a lot more. The industry's been working a lot more with with the engineers, just trying to get that number and see where we can go and where we can meet that productivity index. Some say it's a small drop in pressure. Some say it's a great drop in pressure. It all depends on the field. But we've seen increases globally by lowering the wellhead pressure, and a lot of times paid for fairly quickly. That's why so a lot of people do look to this as a possible solution. Now, with that being said, I'm not saying it's the only solution, obviously, but depending upon things that you mentioned earlier too, like the integrity of the pipeline. If it's a green field, you can put in one pipe, you have everything up front. Brown fields, you could run into some issues. There's no doubt about it. I mean, either if you're pulling on old pipe or if you're pushing on new pipe or old pipe, right? You're going to get some issues. And one of the areas I've done some work in was in the Bakken, but it was north of the border in Canada. Now they're set up with plenty of conveyance systems. They're set up a little differently than we are in the Bakken. But when we drew down the pressure, those pumps saw some welding slag, everything that was in undulating pipelining, and it all came into the pumps. So you saw lots of changes in the flow. And so, that being said, it's something to think about when you're choosing a system.
Yeah, no, I think your point is right, that there's a lot of solutions to reduce costs, and not every solution works for every single producer. And that's something on this show we try to talk about is that the industry is not one company. It's everyone's got their different problems, the different issues, and different goals and objectives. Give me maybe one or two of the biggest objections when you walk in to pitch your product that you've heard that are really maybe misconceptions or things that aren't really issues, but just folks, when they hear this, they go, oh my gosh, this won't work because X, Y, and Z, and how do you answer those?
Okay, so the biggest thing is, what is this? I'm used to conventional separation, compression, and pumping. How does that one machine do this, right? And what do you do with the heat? And how low can you go? Why? There's numerous questions that they ask. The biggest one is, why would I change from what I'm using, which is conventional separation? So the biggest task that anyone who produces multiphase pumping is educating the customer on the product. So, and I'll tell you what, it's a tough battle. You really have to kind of work it from the field. That's the easiest way. You want to give someone an understanding of what they're going to be working on, and it's similar but different. A lot of the equipment on these systems are the same as conventional separation equipment. There's nothing different. The only thing is the heart of it, and it's just a pump instead of a compressor, but it's a pump that acts like a compressor. So a lot of questions come up about heat in heated compression, and so that's usually addressed either with cooling or some means. Other is power and power required. And also, can it be remote? And these are all questions that are simple. They can be addressed. Power requirements, depending upon your gas fraction, they could be, and differential pressure, they could be higher than compression. Some are right in line with compression. So a lot of those questions come up as well. Let's see. Like you had mentioned earlier, effects on pipelines, effects on infrastructure, that as well. Question also, is there room for a central processing facility? Do they have that availability? Can it be used on a wellhead, or if it can be used on a battery series of wells? And also, how do we meter the flow? How do we get payment? That's a big one, because especially in these areas that are, it's on private land, you need to know the custody transfer, and you need to know payment. So you need to know exactly what's coming out of the ground. So that's been something that we're working with some companies now on, and I'll tell you what, that's fairly new. A lot more players involved, but that's something that comes up quite a bit.
Okay, I guess final question for me is, what kind of mix are you looking for? So if you have something that's just real dry gas, it doesn't seem like this is applicable. So at what point does this come into play? Do you need a certain percentage or a certain ratio? Kind of walk us through that process at a high level.
So the equipment can handle 100% gas at the inlet. Now, dry gas in, say, 99.99% GVF is not a fit for our equipment. It's when you start getting those liquid slugs, obviously high liquid levels, 95% up to 97% GVF or that's gas volume fraction. That's where we like to operate in. Another thing is differential pressure. The higher differential pressure, the greater the power, because we're a positive displacement pump, and most multi-phase pumps are positive displacement pumps. So you're gonna lose out on your efficiency due to high differential pressure at high gas fractions. So, and also you have to deal with heat of compression as well. So in that 95, 97% GVF is ideal. Slugging, overcoming terrain issues. I mean, there's lots of benefits using the equipment. I mentioned earlier too, with the downhole equipment, it enhances that as well. So when there's liquids available in that, say at least 5-10% of the total flow volume, and relatively medium to low pressure, it's an ideal fit.
Okay, well, that's great to know. Where can people find out more about you guys? Website, social media, conferences, anything like that?
Well, our website at Leistritzcorp.com. Also, we are on LinkedIn and Twitter. We do email blasts. We work a lot with empowering pumps, sending out webinars and stuff like that. So, and we do a lot of trade shows coming up this year. I think we have the Global Petroleum Show. We'll be out in Calgary, and I know there'll be various shows in the area. I can be reached at jlatronica at Leistritzcorp.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been helpful, and we'll be sure to link to all that stuff in the show notes.
Great, guys.
Thanks a lot, Joe. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again to Joe Latronica for coming on the show today and sharing some of those insights. Really enjoyed having him on. With that, Ryan, I think we are wrapping it up. Y'all be sure to tune in early January. Nate's going to be going in the lake.
We're not wrapping. Me and you are wrapping up. The show will go on, though, if Nate does his job.
I do my job.
If Nate does a job. So we will be here via the audio, but we won't be here in person, is what Josh is trying to say. Right, Josh?
Gone
Yeah,
in
we won't
person,
be-
but
yeah,
not
we
as-
won't be
I will
here.
be here to see Nate freeze his toes off.
Yeah, we'll be
but-
back for that. We ain't missing that. We'll do whatever we got to do for that. So thank you for that. Please consider sharing the show with all your friends, emailing it out to everyone you know. Just hold them 5-star reviews until January
Ratings
1st, and then
reviews.
just pound them into submission
Immediately.
because we are going for the Mount Rushmore status in 2020. That's our 2020 goal. Sergio Chapa actually mentioned the other day that he thinks he should be the fourth head on the shirt. And I thought, you know what? That's not a bad suggestion there. And then he goes, well, but David Blackman's been coming on for a while too. And I thought, well, could we do a half Sergio, half Blackman faced? Or we could take Nate out. So we got me, you, Sergio, and David. That actually makes, and have like a little bitty Nate at the bottom of the mountain kind of stand there.
Yeah,
That'd be
in the
more
water.
appropriate.
In the
water.
water. Yeah.
A little waterfront property in front of the Mount Rushmore. We're getting somewhere with this. So anyways, please share. Thank you guys. We'll have a Merry Christmas. We will be here, but it will just be end of the year review, 2020 predictions. We have a lot of fun stuff. Hopefully some Exxon Mobil stuff for you guys. Hope you enjoy it. And we will talk to you next week.